City Hall in New Rochelle. We are about to interview the mayor and see what he has to say about some of these new developments going on in the city. Let's go meet him.
Mayor interview. Take one. Mayor interview. Take one. You see? And action.
All right. Well, first, I just want to say thank you from me and my team for letting us be able to interview Mr. Mayor Bronson.
It's a pleasure to be with you and glad to welcome you to New Rochelle City Hall.
All right, yes, sir. So, New Rochelle, when you say New Rochelle, what's the first thing that comes to your head?
Home, but in terms of the qualities of the city more broadly, I'd say diversity. We have within our borders people of every circumstance, every heritage, every tradition, every socioeconomic status, and I think that makes life more interesting. It's, for me, a real blessing to have neighbors, to have grown up with classmates, to be sending my own children to school now with friends who are very different from themselves. I think they learn a lot through that experience, and it makes us more complete human beings.
Man, okay. Well, you've been mayor since 2006, right?
Yeah.
So it's been over 10 years. So how has that relationship been, like, with the city, keep on putting you back in the office, you know? So how's that relationship of the city?
I feel really lucky to have this job. You know, it's neat to be involved in the government of the place where you grew up because you feel a fierce sense of loyalty to the community. You really want it to succeed, and I feel like I'm in a position where I can make a meaningful difference to our future. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful that up until now people have returned me to office. But the worst thing you can do in politics is take folks' support for granted.
Right.
And you always have to be performing, and it's not a matter of what you accomplished 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's what are you doing today, and do you have a clear vision for where you want to go tomorrow, and are you taking active steps to get there? So I regard it as a relationship that involves constant dialogue, constant conversation, listening, sharing, and hopefully moving as a community in a positive direction.
Yeah. And, you know, you mentioned thinking about today and in the future. So in the future, do you see yourself going a little bit beyond mayor and maybe governor of New York?
Well, I certainly don't see myself as governor of New York. I'm a realist about what's possible and what's not possible. I would not rule out the possibility of higher office. I've run for higher office previously. I ran for Westchester County Executive in 2013 and did not succeed, although I'm grateful for the experience. But I also think there's a danger in being so focused on the next step that you lose your footing where you are today. So, you know, my focus is being as good a mayor as I can be, and if there's an opportunity down the road, maybe, but we'll see.
Man, I know that the people like you already like you, and this is my first meeting with you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, yes, sir. Okay. Well, there was an article published last year, right, with the Westchester magazine, and it discussed the $4 billion partnership with RXR. So could you tell me how that came about?
So, although New Rochelle has some great strengths, we have wonderful neighborhoods, as I've said already, we have a talented and diverse human population, great natural beauty, a terrific location along Long Island Sound, good mass transit access, close to New York City, all of that. And yet, despite that, for my entire life, our downtown area has struggled. And I think most people believe it has been short of its potential. That's not to say there aren't some great buildings and great stores and great historic sites. It has pockets of strength, but the downtown as a whole is not as appealing as it could be to the full spectrum of people who live in our city and region. So with that in mind, several years ago, the City Council, on a unanimous bipartisan basis, adopted a downtown development framework that is the most ambitious in our history. Calls for about 6,300 new housing units, which is significant in a city of 80,000. About 12 million square feet of total build-out, 1 million square feet of retail, 2 million of office. And more than just sort of articulating what we want the end state to be, we put in place mechanisms to get there.
Right.
So we have a master development agreement, which you mentioned, with RXR. They have an exclusive opportunity to develop a variety of publicly owned sites in the downtown. We think that they will undertake catalytic developments that will be beneficial in and of themselves, and will also send a signal to the rest of the marketplace that this is a place where you can do business successfully. Second, we adopted something called a form-based zoning code that governs not just those publicly owned sites, but the entire downtown area, which is much larger. It is very flexible when it comes to use, but very prescriptive when it comes to urban design.
Right.
You know, we've learned over the course of a couple of generations what it is that makes cities appealing, what makes an active streetscape. So all that's hardwired into the zoning code. And third, we approved an environmental review for the entire build-out scheme. And what that means as a practical matter is because we went through the time and the expense and the really robust public involvement to do that environmental review, now individual projects that fit within that context can really be front-loaded and can move very quickly from proposal to approval. So we're kind of shovel-ready.
Right.
And as a consequence of all that together, we've seen an investment boom in New Rochelle. We've got about 25 specific projects that have been approved. More than 10 of them are already under construction. More will begin construction during the course of this year and next year. And the result of all of this will be a downtown that is more economically and culturally vibrant, that preserves the socioeconomic diversity that we already possess and that we want to keep in place, that has a wider range of goods and services, that is appealing to more people in our region, and that I think also serves the interests of the New York metropolitan area as a whole.
Yeah.
You know, the region needs to grow by 2 million jobs, 4 million people over the next 20 years. It's not reasonable to expect the 5 boroughs alone to accomplish that.
Right.
So transit-served suburbs like New Rochelle, for that matter, like Yonkers and White Plains and Peekskill, they're an important part of that regional equation.
Exactly. So would you say that the new developments is kind of your new vision of New Rochelle? Is that what you would see?
I think it's an important part of the vision for New Rochelle.
So what would you say your vision of New Rochelle would be?
Well, this is what we want to change. The downtown, which has underperformed, needs to perform at a higher level. That's what we're trying to achieve. I think in many other parts of New Rochelle, the goal is continuity and preservation. You know, we don't want to disrupt neighborhoods that are charming and historic and beautiful. We want to make sure we preserve our open space and parkland. We want to make sure that our school system continues to do an excellent job of educating young people from all sorts of different backgrounds and interests. So we're very mindful of what we need to preserve and what we need to change. And I should add, another opportunity that we have for change is on our waterfront. Much of it was developed 100 years ago when the shoreline was seen as an industrial access point. So there are long stretches where there's no public access to the site, where there are contaminants, where it's really kind of off limits. And so we're doing our best to remake the shoreline so that it's a place which the entire community can enjoy. And that too would be a meaningful change over the next few years.
That's great. Okay. Well, moving along, with the new buildings and everything that's being built, all this new coming into the town, so with the existing businesses and everything, what would you say to the people that are about to, go through that change?
Well, we should first be honest about the fact that there is some disruption associated with this period of change. Construction itself has some negative impacts. Parking can be dislocated. Landlords may see an opportunity to command higher rents, and that can create some difficulties with existing tenants. So we are very mindful of that, and we try to work with existing residents and business owners in the downtown to minimize those disruptions. But I'd say we should also keep our mind on what the end state will be, because this transitional period, although difficult, is temporary. And from a business perspective, when this is done, you're going to have a lot more customers. I mean, that's kind of the name of the game. What is it going to take for a business to succeed or for a business to locate here? Well, it's all about, are there people who are going to spend money on my product or service? And I think that condition will be greatly improved. In terms of housing, as we said already, there'll be thousands more housing opportunities, including hundreds of units that are set below market so that they are affordable. We're doing a particular job of trying to attract artists to New Rochelle. One whole project is marketed specifically for artists with affordable studios and shared workspace. So it's a multi-layered strategy that's designed to make New Rochelle a place that's ideal no matter what your circumstances and interests. We want to make sure there's a home for everyone.
Right. My dad always says change is hard, but it's necessary.
That's a good line.
Yeah.
And hopefully not just necessary, but ultimately beneficial.
Yes, very beneficial. I know that it's going to be. And what would you say about gentrification?
Well, that's kind of what we were discussing just a moment ago. And it's a tricky word because people mean different things when they say it. Sometimes people mean it in a positive context.
Right.
They mean an area that's improving and becoming more attractive and so forth.
Right.
And sometimes people mean it in a negative context, that folks are being forced out of the places that they know and love. And so, as I said before, I think what's been important to us is recognizing we are socioeconomically diverse right now and wanting to preserve that socioeconomic diversity. So when this process is completed, the ratio of market rate to affordable housing units in New Rochelle will shift towards market. And that's by design, because you need that disposable income to support a healthy business environment. But in absolute numbers, there will be many more affordable units than there are today. And so for people who are sort of thinking, well, how am I going to be able to live in New Rochelle? Our hope is that there'll be quality housing products at different price points that will be accessible to just about anyone.
Yeah, that's a good plan. That is a good plan.
Thank you.
I know some people are scared, but it's all going to work out.
And let me say, those fears are understandable. I respect them. And I think it's incumbent upon those of us in government not to just be dismissive of people who have those feelings, but to engage in a meaningful dialogue and try to think through together what are the sensible solutions that work for everyone.
Okay, so I mentioned the blessing of the city that you guys just got. New Rochelle just received $10 million state grants, and you quoted saying, "We are proud to be the recipient of this award that will create exciting opportunities for New Rochelle, its residents, businesses, and visitors." So how do you feel, and what would you address to the people about the properties and values and the increase, the lower income families, basically really what you just said?
So I can elaborate on it a little bit, specifically with respect to the grant you mentioned. This is something called the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. It's given to only one community in our entire multi-county region each year. So dozens of competitors. New Rochelle was thrilled to be selected in 2018. It's a $10 million award from New York State. And since our selection, we put together a collaborative process involving neighborhood representatives, regional leaders, state leaders, to think through what is our action plan? How do we want to use that $10 million?
Right.
And we just recently submitted our request list to the state. So it includes, the largest item is something we call the link, which would be repurposing an over-engineered multi-lane highway that's kind of bulldozed through neighborhoods and making it into a linear park. That would connect the Lincoln Avenue corridor to the downtown. The Lincoln Avenue corridor is it's a vibrant neighborhood, but one that is income constrained, has a number of economic challenges. And so this would be a great open space asset that would be available to all the residents of the area and would also provide physical access to employment and transit, which doesn't exist today. At the same time, we're undertaking something called Complete Streets. This is traffic calming and safety on Lincoln Avenue itself, making improvements to the local Boys and Girls Club, solar installation there that will help defray operating costs for the Boys and Girls Club, let them use those resources directly for services. Heritage Center, that was a proposal that came directly from the community. So there are about actually 10 or 12 specific initiatives which I think are aimed at, on the one hand, benefiting the quality of life for people who are in the community today,
Right.
and on the other hand, strengthen the economy of New Rochelle as a whole so that we're a magnet for people tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we said from the get-go, projects that we fund have to check off both of those boxes. And we're now waiting to hear from the state. They'll have to approve those specific selections, but I'm very excited about what we've come up with.
Yeah, man, it sounds really great, and those are some great points to use for that money. You know, that money can be put to great use. So another article in Westchester Magazine last year in November, there was an announcement on a $1 million grant to New Rochelle, virtual reality city plan. Can you please shed some light on that?
Sure, we were the winner of something called the Mayor's Challenge from Bloomberg Philanthropies.
Okay.
In this case, there were hundreds of cities nationwide that competed, and we were one of 9 finalists that received this $1 million award. And our proposal was kind of a fun thing. We worked with some creative technologists, that's the term, which I learned only through this process, on a augmented reality app that would enable anyone to kind of visualize a public space or a project or development and make suggestions for how it could be altered or improved, better understand how it fits into its context. So instead of kind of static renderings or text descriptions, which is the traditional way that we understand these things, this is a more immersive way of sort of visualizing and participating in the growth and evolution of one's community. So I think it's kind of exciting. It's, you know, it's a little bit like Pokemon Go meets Sim City. And so we're really just in the early embryonic stages.
Right.
In those first stages, we had to kind of produce a proof of concept, and now we're going to be utilizing that $1 million award to create an open source app that will be usable in New Rochelle and elsewhere. It's really fun.
Just something fun to be involved.
Yeah, and useful, fun and useful at the same time.
Yeah. Ever since I moved here, right? Moved here last year, cranes and bulldozers have become a daily sight, and we're in 2019. So when do you foresee all these projects being like finalized?
Well, the plan we adopted in 2015 was a 10-year vision. So figure that'll run until roughly 2025.
Right.
But in a sense, it never ends. I mean, it's the nature of a city that it's always changing. And when this 10-year plan runs its course, I think it's probable that the city will adopt some vision for the next step. But it's fair to say that the intensity of construction, I think, will be greatest within the next 2 or 3 years, when a lot of big projects are going to be breaking ground and beginning to rise out of the ground. And then I think it will gradually taper off after that. And of course, once you have these anchors in place, then the new shape of the downtown begins to sort of solidify. But look, cities are constantly changing. And that's part of what makes them exciting and magnetic. So I don't know that we want to lose that quality.
I don't think you will. Mr. Mayor, I think New Rochelle is in great hands with you.
Thank you. I appreciate the compliment, and I invite you to come back and visit as often as you like.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this.
Cut.
Wow.
Thank you.
All good?
That's it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
my pleasure.
That was it. Thanks so much.
I must say, you're an excellent speaker.
That's why he's there.
Thank you. Nice of you to say.
You articulate quite the way.
Well, I mean, this is stuff I talk about a lot, so ask me about another subject, and I'll fumble around. So,
Thank you so much.